I've got both of us back again.
Wow. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Last Gasp Podcast. I think we're on to episode 7 now. Thanks for joining us once again. This week we are joined by Tom Bird from the FlyFishing team at Draycote, Eyebrook, and when we're missing Thornton.
Yeah.
Thornton. And once again, we've got Paul. So hope you guys are doing all right.
That's normal.
Yeah, no, fine.
Good. Thanks for joining us. It's a Saturday. We don't normally do a recording on the Saturday, but Tom's a busy man. Draycote's a busy place, so we're pleased to get you on, Tom.
No.
Tom, we're going to chat mainly, obviously, about Draycote and Eyebrook. A lot of people out there that listen to this will fish them venues, or hopefully, if they haven't fished them venues, look to be fishing them venues in the near future, now with everything back open.
Yeah.
We haven't had a guest on for a while, so we're going to do our podcast guest questions.
Okay.
So there's nothing to fear there, don't worry.
That's all right.
I'm not going to ask you which colour hair you have.
Today, Scott.
I don't know, with Paul's voting, there's probably something to worry about.
Huh?
Yeah. Well, I do have to edit these things quite a lot, as people might know. It's never normally me that's at fault there. It's normally Paul.
No, I'm not going to be. Listen, I don't give a shit. You get me opinion, and that's it. If you don't like it, well, sorry.
No, that's where everyone likes you, Paul.
Somebody like it.
Oh, that's just me and Tom were talking about it. We thought we had someone that actually liked it, but we couldn't put a surname to it. It was just a first name.
Yeah, my fucking mother doesn't like it. Nah, she does.
She cooks your ham, egg, and chips every time I speak to you, so. Proper tea.
Right, fishing.
Fishing, yes. So, Draycote back open, Eyebrook back open. For the guys that aren't really familiar with the two, Tom, just give us a quick rundown of the size, how many boats you guys got on there, top spots, really. You know, a lot of the top spots that I've always been to Draycote have been on the shoals across the middle.
Yeah.
Don't say too much, Tom, because I'm there Tuesday, Wednesday.
But this won't go out before then, will it?
No, not with Scott editing.
Yeah.
So the two very different waters. Obviously, Eyebrook's the smaller of the two. That's got a fleet of 26 boats and 2 wheelie boats. A lot of top of the water stuff. Average depth there is only sort of, I think it's 17.5 foot, something like that. Deepest point's about 37 down by the dam. So that struggles when it gets to the hot sort of time of year, July, but it's really good before then. Opens in sort of, we've started opening it in late March. Fishes really well, buzzers, nymphs, dries, sort of hot spots really. Early season, you're looking at the Hawthorns, the Bell, Sam's Dyke, Mucky Bay, and then as it warms up towards sort of April, May, Stoke Dry, round the Cowshed, around the Willows, that's also good early season. Robbo's Cabin, and then as it comes hot again, basically you get everything stays in the basin where the deep water is, and drops deep.
Like in the minute,
it's fishing well. They're starting to warm up a bit, and there's a lot of damsels.
What's the weed like?
It's all right, not too bad. There's been a lot of swans on recently. The last 2 years, there's been absolutely loads of swans. So last year at Stoke Dry, where it normally gets really weedy, they basically ate it all. So that was pretty handy.
All right.
Yeah, that's something you probably don't, just hearing you say that, it makes perfect sense, but it's something you never really take into question. Like, you talk about weed growth in a lot of still waters in the summer.
It's good that I will remember, hadn't really thought of that.
No, but you don't, I don't imagine like a massive pot of swans making so much difference to how someone's got to fish.
We used to fish on Rutland and look for the swans.
Yeah,
2 years ago, the swans cleared like a tiny horseshoe hole at the top of Stoke Dry, and you had to basically drive through the weed and then into this little horseshoe hole, and all the fish were sat there and just fish dries in the little hole. Just keep going back round.
Like ice.
Yeah, basically. Just obviously without the risk of falling and dying.
Yeah.
So Draycote, bigger, 658 acres. 4.85 miles around the bank. got 32 boats and a wheelie boat. Quite a lot deeper. Deepest point's up by B-Boy at the top dam, so that's 67 foot at full water level. And then obviously, as you mentioned, we've got the sort of shoals. So there's 3 main ones. So there's Croft Shoal, Middle Shoal, and Lamcote Shoal. No, there's 4. And then Miss Musborough. The shoals fish really well. What I really like about the shoals is you can go over there sort of early season, sort of March, April, and find overwintered fish feeding on buzzers over the top of them. Yeah. Good on the dries as well, because obviously the buzzers hatch out from them, get blown over the open water, and then the fish follow them. So I think that's one of the reasons that Draycote's so good on the dries. As a Midlands reservoir, the buzzers hatch out and then get blown off, and the fish head straight over the open water after them.
Yeah. Like I said on the intro, every time I've been Draycote, which is not as many as I'd like, drifting onto and off the back of the one you mentioned last, the Musborough.
Yeah, so that's between off the Sailing Club near N and Y Boy in a horseshoe shape.
That's always been a really good one.
Yeah, that's quite a big one, that one. Middle Shoals near P Boy. Lamcote's near X, although at the minute X Boy isn't on the res, as Paul found out, and he was trying to find it last week. And then Croft Shoal's the easiest one to find because it's just off Lincroft Point and it's got a big yellow buoy that marks it.
Yeah.
But in terms of sort of my top areas for like dries and drifting, in between X, Y, and P, you've got an area with deep water, and basically you tend to get the food all funnels into that sort of triangle, if you like, depending on the wind, because you've got the food coming off Middle Shoal, Musborough Shoal, and also Lamcote and Croft. It's all sort of in that triangle, so all the food can get funneled into that area, and you can just drift around there, and there's normally loads of fish.
Yeah.
But at the minute, it's fishing well. There's fish fairly well spread all over. You know, I was out with Lloyd after work the other day, and we went out and we drifted from the bottom of Toft to the buoy line, from the buoy line all the way through to G, and then basically level with Lincroft Point, and we caught all the way through. I think we had 14 apiece on one long drift.
Yeah, that's something we talked about in last week's pod, about the fact that the fish seem to be a lot more widely spread and out in open water than what they usually would be this time of year.
Yeah, there's a lot of they're fairly well. I mean, they're literally, it's all corners at the minute. You can, you know, people have been going down to Toft, Rainbow Corner, Biggin. They really are well spread.
Yeah. So you've been sort of stocking since you opened back up.
Yeah, so we weren't tied into a contract with our fish suppliers, so we didn't have an obligation to continue stocking all the way through. So, you know, we just had to say to them, you know, look, we've not got the revenue coming in, so we're not going to continue stocking. And then as soon as we got back opened again, we've continued supporting the farmers that have obviously we'd ordered the fish from. And we've been sort of saying to them, you know, what would you like us to take to help you along, as well as them helping us. So
are you putting more fish in per stocking than what you normally would? Or
no, the low size are the same. I mean, from Rainbow Valley, Mark has had some slightly bigger fish that would have gone to the table market. So they've been sort of, you know, there's been a few 3 to 5 pounders in the loads that we wouldn't probably normally have. They go for filleting, so we've been having some loads of them to help clear some space off the site for him.
Yeah.
So there's been more of those going in, but in terms of actual numbers, we're about the same, you know, per load.
You've got to think those bigger ones that you put in come the autumn when they switch onto the fry. They'll be
me and Mark grow some absolutely lovely fish anyway, so they go in silvered and full tailed. So yeah, they'll be, if they do go all the way through to sort of September, October and into November when they're on the fry, there'll be some absolutely barnstorming fish.
Yeah.
I mean, Lloyd had one the other day that was, I'd probably say from 2 stockings ago, that was probably nudging towards the top end of £6. Yeah. And if that grows on and gets a full tail with raising it, there's probably going to be not much land in it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Last week when I was there, Tom, I had a couple run about the 5 mark. And what I can say is that virtually, I would say the bulk of the fish were absolutely perfect and went like bloody stink.
Yeah, no, we've had some really good quality. I mean, all the stuff that we put in. So when we closed, I think we put about 8,500 in. And our records show from last year that when we shut, we had over 18,000 fish in there. Now, obviously, you can't. We start at zero every year. We don't account those into our. You know, we don't go, oh, we've got 18,000 in to start with. We're not going to put as many in this year. We start at zero. But we see a high proportion of those fish, you know, overwintering. And from my point of view, a lot of our fish overwinter on the bottom. Come November, me and Lee go out fishing off the side of the shoals in about 40 foot of water with booby bashers and boobies. And we catch a lot of fish doing that. And, you know, as Lee always says, when they're down there, they find food, normally on snails or sitting over the mussel beds and not really eating. He says they won't come back up. And that's what we seem to find. They just overwinter on the bottom. So we don't really have much of a problem with cormorants. And also the site's busy all the time. You know, the sailing club run all the way through the winter. So we don't have real issue with predation.
Yeah, you've got a good head of perch and coarse fish in there as well, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of perch in there. There's some good perch. There's been reports of some sort of good £3 perch coming out of the minute from the lads on the fly.
Yeah. Do you ever get anyone interested in taking a perch boat out and jigging for them and angling water too at the back end?
We have a few people who sort of ask, you know, could we sort of target the perch and the pike, but probably not enough to warrant ever thinking about it. And also, you know, we are just interested in the trout primarily.
So one of the questions I was going to ask, you probably touched on it a bit there, is with obviously having two months of the season pretty much missed out, are you guys going to run a later closing time in the winter, or are you going to try and run as long as you can?
No, so we're governed by our lease with Severn Trent. And when obviously I took the site on, we got the lease to the. Historically, it used to be October, but I've applied for the lease until November.
Yeah.
And they said yes, but I don't think, you know, we wouldn't be able to extend it past the 30th of November.
Yeah. Is the water level how it normally is this time of year? We compared last week. We compared Rutland with Stocks, and Rutland was pretty much full. Is it like a normal height, whereas Stocks is really well down. I mean, you'll know Stocks really well from working.
Yeah.
The Willows Island, there's like 10 foot of dry ground around the whole island. There's no water in between Willow and the top of the shallows.
Right.
Hollands Bay was nearly dried up, so that was well down for the time of year.
Yeah, obviously you'd expect that to sort of happen in June, July.
Yeah, it was probably, when I went, it was probably about a month ahead of itself.
Yeah.
It seems though it's lower a lot earlier this year.
Yeah. I mean, so Draycote, we are all pump fed. So unlike Stocks, you know, there's no rivers that flow into it. The water's pumped directly from the lem, and the pumping season is October till April. And this year, obviously, with all the rain we had, they were able to turn the pumps on basically from October all the way and keep them on all the way through. And they actually stopped because they got to about 96% in, what was that, March, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then just after we got closed down, they actually turned the pumps back on for a little period, obviously thinking that there'd be a demand of water.
Yeah.
So they took it up to about 98%, which is pretty much as full as they'll take it. So we're currently sitting on water levels about 90%. So we're probably a touch higher than we would normally, but that's probably just because of the wet winter we had rather than excess water usage.
Cool. So one of the things you like fishing most, Tom, and quite similar to Paul's, both the dries.
Yeah.
So I wanted to use this time to sort of get both of you guys' opinions on how you set up.
Yeah.
You know, your leader choice. Do you use poly leaders, or what do you use to help turn over when the wind's quite strong or when there's no wind at all? That's often a harder way of turning a dry over when there's no wind.
Yeah.
It is for some people, Scott.
But I've never seen you turn over 3 Midas in a flat calm.
tell you I can't. It's just only 5 foot from the boat.
Well, that's maybe an interesting point there, Paul, is not trying to cast too far for a start.
Listen, anybody that's been in a boat with us, Tom, you've witnessed it. I don't cast a long way. And the reason I don't cast is because I cannot. No. My view on it is...
It is.
Did you?
What?
What, Tom?
No, nothing.
Yeah.
Just coughed.
If the farther you cast, the farther you're pushing the fish away. And there's less fish will come close at the boat. When you target a fish at distance, I don't give a shit what any other clever shite says, but the further away a fish is, when you try to hook it from the boat, it's harder to hook. And it's harder, you lose more fish that way. So my theory is, just sit, relax, let them come to the boat a bit, and even in a flat calm, I don't cast that far.
I've had it in matches in a flat calm where it was on Gratham, I literally sat, boat partner was doing something down the other end of the boat, and the fish weren't coming near us because he was casting, but they were coming like off the bow towards me, and I was literally sat there with the fly in my hand waiting for him to come close enough that I could have a cast, and I'd literally had one cast, catch it, get it in the boat, try my fly off and sit there and wait for another one to come to the boat.
And here's another theory for you, Scott. It's a bit complicated, so take notice of what I'm saying.
Hang on. Let me get a pen.
Right. Cheeky bastard.
I'm ready, look.
Right.
Ready.
You know when you're in a boat and you've got the drogue out and it's quite windy, right? In front of the boat, you end up with a V of slightly calmer water and slower moving water because it's being sheltered by the boat. And you will be shocked at how many fish I take in that V.
One thing as well, I agree with Paul on fishing short, is I think fishing short with dries, you cover the water more effectively. If you, for example, chucked your flies out and left them on the water for 30 seconds and then retrieved for that entirety of maybe more than, say 45 seconds a minute, you've chucked out and you figured a bait to the flies. In that time, there may well have been a fish that's cruising left to right across the wind in front of the boat in that gap of your fly line that has only seen your fly line, not seen your flies. Whereas if you've got 15 yards of fly line out and you fan cast around the boat 5 times, leaving them on the water for 15 seconds, in that minute, it's going to have probably seen your flies and you've got a chance of hooking it. Whereas that fish might have just swam underneath the fly line and never seen your fly.
Yeah. So, talking about like distance from the boat, I know, Paul, you go really, really short sometimes, like a couple of rod lengths.
The windier it is, the closer I come to the boat.
Yeah. As a rule of thumb, what would be your normal distance? Is it 2 or 3 rod lengths, or is it a bit further?
I would probably say 3 to 4 rod lengths on average. Right. It's the furthest I can cast. Usually this is how I work it out. If I've got a false cast, I'm probably too far.
Right.
Yeah, the way I work it out is I know I use a Rio Gold floater for dries, and a Rio Gold floater is heads 41 feet. And I know that if I'm cast basically 36 foot of that fly line head will load my rod. So that's how far I cast with it. Like Paul, I want the rod to load on every cast.
Yeah.
And then if there's a fish that's a little bit further away, I can shoot some line at it. But
see, I don't even pull the line off, because sometimes I'll sit there and think to myself, I've seen it, but I'm not going for it yet. And
I'm like that. What I do is I always try and spot a fish that's moving, I'd say 2 or 3 rises away from me.
Yeah.
So I spot it. Right. Yeah. I've seen you. Logged you. Where you going? Right. So you've come up twice. It's taken you 30 seconds to get to that. So I know in 30 seconds time you'll be there, and I'll chuck my fly where I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And if the allotted time that I've worked out, 30 seconds, has gone past and it's not taken my fly, I'll pick up and I'll put it to the right, to the left, because it might have deviated, or I'll chuck it even shorter to the boat and work out that way. But on Draycote, sometimes what they'll do is they'll get to the boat and veer off. So that's when I will shoot a little bit more line at them.
Have you noticed, Tom, though, the amount of people that fish dries and they constantly put the line down the same line?
Yeah.
And they don't go all over the place.
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, one thing as well.
As a fish, I never go down the same line.
No, and one thing as well is if you chuck across the wind and there's fish are tracking up the wind, they've got 3 flies to see rather than 1.
Yeah.
Well, sort of. Depends on
well, they've got 3 Midases. They've got 3 Midases. Yeah. They've got a choice of a ginger one and then another ginger one. And oh, hang on. Oh, there's a ginger one there.
Yeah.
So
it's it's tough little things. It's like, you know, a lot of people wouldn't even dream of fishing dries in a strong wind. Now, I love that, but in the time of me lifting off and not false casting, so I lift off, and I know you'll think I'm lying, Scott, but at that distance, I've changed my casting style so that when I go back and then forward, I can feel the flies behind us clicking. And when they're clicking, they disperse the water, right? But in the time it takes to lift off and cast back down, I'm constantly looking in front of us for slightly calmer areas in between waves. And whereas, again, some people don't think of that, and they're constantly putting them in the same place all the time. You've got to be, your speed of thought's got to be really good on dries, I think.
I mean, one thing that you're saying is a strong wind, and obviously I know you both know him, but David Parker was down a couple of years ago at Draycote, and it was a massive, and I mean, I'm talking like verging on not letting the boats out strong, and he got tucked under the top down wall, and he was basically dapping Midases. That's how he caught. He didn't have any fly line out of the boat. He's basically just holding them, and they were just touching the water, and he had like 30 fish, 40 fish. He absolutely was nailing them out.
It's amazing how many people kind of catch on the main.
Oh no, I have people that can't catch on it. It certainly works in Draycote.
Oh, well, it does. It works anywhere. But my way of thinking is, you know, if it's too complicated for you, then fish something else.
I know you're the same. Confidence. Every time I chuck my dries out, and to be fair, I'm just confident on dries now. I'm not particularly pattern. I chuck out, you know, cripple midge, chuck out a daddy, Midas, hopper. I'm expecting something to rise over it. So when something does rise over it, I'll hook it. I'm ready. Yeah. Whereas some people, you know, if they're going out with the mindset of, well, I'm never catching a Midas, they're probably not going to catch the Midas because they'll be looking away. They might be moving it. They're not fishing it effectively. Just change something you're happy with. Yeah. If you're catching hoppers, fish hoppers.
If you think about it, it's the same if you're fishing nymphs. How many times have you been fishing away, you do a cast, you look at your line, and everything feels perfect. It looks perfect, it feels perfect, and shock, your rod goes like that.
Yeah, it's the same when you're not happy with your leader. All you can think about is my droppers are too close together.
Yeah.
And you're fishing it, so then inadvertently you might cast out, and then when your line's not quite right, or you're not happy with your nymph, so you pull it straight in. Well, you've not fished that cast effectively, or you think, oh, this isn't really working. And then you start switching off figure of eighting quickly. Whereas if you're perfectly happy with it all, you're going to catch more.
Yeah. One of the things I like.
I taught you well, Tom.
Well, yeah, you certainly did teach me on the dries.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like about fishing with Paul is
work.
So one of the things I like about fishing in the boat with Paul is you never know where he's going to cast.
No, I always found as well is when there's a fish moving your side, he'd clock it and then start false casting.
Yeah.
So you'd be waiting for him to stop casting, and after sort of 5 or 6 false casts, you'd look over and you'd be like, and he's laughing. You're like, oh great, cheers for that.
Yeah, because my favourite trick, and I done it with a guy, I started doing it, was a guy called Kevin Beattie. And when you're sitting in the boat and you're drifting along, and I clock a fish coming up the wind, but I'm not going to cast it yet. When I think it's about close enough, I'm thinking, shit, it's went on his side slightly. I'd sit there and go, there you go, Kevin, to your right. And he's sitting, and drop it, and he drops it. And while he's doing that, I cover the fish and get it. And I've even had the situation where he was lifting off, and he got his first cast out, and he turned round to us and he went, you've done it again, haven't you? And I went, yeah. I love playing tricks like that.
Doesn't like it when it does it to him, though. You try doing that.
That's when size matters, son, and I'm a lot bigger than you.
I remember when we were down to Draycote doing that the videos for the Angling Trust for the youth. And that evening we went out on the first day. I took a fish from, you thinking about like slightly down the middle of the boat. I took a fish from, it must have been 1 degree down port side.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
People cannot work it out. All you've got to do is look at the seat in the middle and look at the line the seat's going. So that is your line. And if you cross it, I'll throw something at you.
I was just.
But it depends. Do you go down the middle or do you go to like their side of the seat?
No. So
go
Tom,
right down the middle.
I
am the fairest person on a boat.
Tom, you've got the middle board, and then you've got the one like 2/3 of it to the pointy end.
I said the middle board. I'm on about the board that you're sitting on.
Yeah, you go off the.
I was going to say you've got the outside edge of the middle board. You see, so you've got about another. You've got half a foot there to play with.
He's not even on the middle board. He's on the one 2/3 up towards the point. One that you sit across.
Yeah, I think it is one of those Irish boats that's got seats everywhere. The one right in the bow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember covering a one behind the engine, and he was sat on the engine. That didn't go down well either.
I remember being up in the North Army in the old Pinson edges. And I was in with a Belgian guy, and I'm watching fish come up on his side, and I just couldn't help it. I lifted off, and I went straight across his back. And as it hit the water, I looked at him, he looked at me, and I went, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Lifted off, but I get too excited, man.
I have to say, it's so frustrating when you're seeing loads of fish rise, like in a match, or if you're on a... I've been out with my mate, and he says I'm a nightmare for it. And if it's coming up and he's not quite clocked it, I'll just go, I'm having that. But just cast across him.
There's nothing more frustrating.
What I've noticed a few times now, and Tony Baldwin can back us up on this. We were on Blithfield, and bloody hell, I must have went 20-1 up on him. Tony was fishing dries, I'm fishing dries, but it was nothing that he had done. The fish were coming on an angle from the right-hand side, because believe it or not, when I've shared boat with Tony, I'm on the point. So they were coming from the right-hand side. That's because he's left-handed, by the way. They were coming from the right on a 45 degree up towards the boat. So I got first chuck at everything.
Gareth Jones says...
In the afternoon, it completely changed the other way, and he'd done exactly the same to me. Mark Witherman, I had it where I think I went 6-7-0 up on him at Blithfield. He was on dries, I was on dries. He ripped his dries off. He couldn't get a take. He ripped his dries off, put the pullers on, and he started catching. But what he'd done by putting the pullers on was stop me catching, because the fish were coming across him first.
Yeah.
Then pullers were putting them off, and I couldn't get a take.
Gareth Jones has the theory that the fish at Draycote more often than not move right to left, and the man on the pointy end gets the first go. So he says sometimes the only way to get them is to cast longer than the man on the pointy end and go on an angle, and then basically you're getting the ones that are further away coming right to left that haven't seen his flies.
Yeah.
Not sure why. We've never quite figured it out. We've had quite a few conversations about why we think it might be, but never quite got there.
I definitely think that happens a lot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I like being on the pointy end at stocks for that. Well, one, because the engines normally break your hand, but the other one is if you're on the pointy end and you can chuck down, because most of the fish at stocks are usually off the bank, especially early season when you've got matches on. Early season when you've got matches on, chuck it down the bank. If you can get your flies to the bank before the guy on the engine, if he can't chuck as far, you'll normally get it.
Yeah, well, see, for dries, I always prefer to be on the engine because the wind's not fighting you when you're chucking 45 degrees over the bow, over the engine. Whereas when you try and do it off the bow, the flies just wrap around the leader, or you have to cast like sort of side behind the back of the boat and then lay them, which is annoying.
Mm. So we talked about flies, we talked about that. What about leaders, like construction and type of...
Yeah.
Do you guys go fluoro? Do you go copolymer?
I've gone... So I used to be the same as Paul, 3 flies, fluorocarbon all the time. But I've had a few conversations with Gareth Jones and various... And he was telling me a theory, and I do think that some of this time it could be true, about fluorocarbon and dries. And obviously, I do still use fluorocarbon a lot. I use 8.5 pound Fluoroflex Plus. But one of the things that he always talks about is drag. And obviously, I've thought about drag before. You see a lot of people where they're retrieving they're keeping up with the flies. And I always say to them, well, you're not moving them, but you're not letting them drift naturally. You're holding them back, which will cause a bit of drag for the fish. And he's got the same idea with fluorocarbon, that it actually at times beds the flies in so well that they don't actually move with the waves. They're up and down. They're sort of dug that well in that they're not bedding in with the waves, and you get a lot of aborted takes because of that. You know, I've been out on a day where I've been fishing fluorocarbon with him. He's been on copolymer, and I've rose more fish than he has, but he's hooked every single one and got a positive take, whereas they've swirled at mine. And he, you know, after a good conversation, we kind of put it down to the fact that my fluorocarbon was bedding the flies so well in that they weren't actually moving with the waves. They were dragging with them. They were digging in and dragging. So
God, you get too complicated now for me.
So there is times now where I do use copolymer. I always use copolymer on culls now. I've gone away from fluorocarbon. I got fed up with picking the fluorocarbon up and it dipping the culls down all the time and having to spend more time drying them.
You know, we should definitely think, try it, because I use fluorocarbon all the time, and I've used the same fluorocarbon since it come out. Must be 25, 30 years ago, and it's always Mirage. I always use it, 8.5 pound. And the amount of times, you know, when you first go to lift off, you'll get an aborted take or a swirl or whatever.
Yeah.
What I do is when I'm lifting off, that first lift off, that first part of it, I might only move the flies that much. And when they're doing that and they're coming short, by lifting it off gently and then flicking it, you're shocked at how many takes you get when you just move them that 6 inches.
That's a really good little take for Sweet Hope. You catch loads of fish doing that up there.
Yeah.
Loads
See, I'll look at it and I'll probably fish quicker than most people. And, you know, I've had in the past where people have said, bloody hell, you're using fluorocarbon. I can't get away with that. It makes me dry sink. And I'm thinking, how long are you leaving the flies on the water? 2 days.
Yeah.
My flies don't have a chance to sink.
Yeah, well, the way you fish, you probably, the advantage of fluorocarbon is it sinks straight, or it sinks quicker, so you're not waiting 2-3 seconds for your leader to go subsurface.
Yeah, I think we'll get a little bit too, you know, I can go and fish dries with fluorocarbon. You would think this will be perfect on a flat cob, and I cannot get that fluorocarbon to go under.
Yeah.
Does it stop us getting takes? No. I usually put my mud on at the beginning of the day, and the only time I'll touch my mud again after that is if I cock a cast up and I've got to put a new cast on. You know, and then you get somebody in the extreme, and I'm not saying it's wrong, because if it works for them, then great. But they'll say, oh, I had to degrease every 5th cast, and I'm thinking, Jesus.
Yeah. Nah. Spend more time in the boat.
Yeah. And I just, listen, we're talking about the fish. It's stupid. It's opportunistic, whatever. Okay. And it sees food, and it's going to have it. I've actually seen it, and Stevie Peart witnessed this. I remember watching a fish. There's the surface. The fish come up, and it was bolt upright, and it was looking at me fly. And it was there for about 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden, it didn't move for it. All of a sudden, my fly just disappeared. But its mouth opened and went, just sucked it in. So, nah.
Again, I think with the mud, it's confidence. If I'm fishing dries and I can see my leader, I'll degrease it again. But again, that's just confidence. It might not make any difference, but I won't fish it properly if I can see.
What mud do you use?
Tom Hunt's normally, or yours. If I've got some, I did actually find a tub. I actually found a tub of yours in the cupboard earlier. So it's currently had a bit of water in. It's drying out.
Yeah.
You got any of yours left?
Yeah. Can I have some more? Just chucking it out there.
Nah, I've only got 2 tubs left. Next time I do some, I'll make you some tub.
Do you mean when you come down on Wednesday?
I'll not have a chance because obviously I haven't got any tungsten powder and take a while. I've got 2 tubs. I might sort some out.
Yeah, we'll just give that boat that you wanted to Tony, and you have to go for that.
Right, you know what I asked you before we started the podcast?
Yeah.
If you say yes to that, I'll give you a full tub.
Oh, wow. I said I'll have to see.
Right. Well, if you sort that out, I'll give you a full tub. If you don't, you're not getting it.
There we go then.
Right. So let's get off that, because that could leave so many things open to question about what we're actually talking about there. Old man proposing to a young child.
Hey.
So, one thing I mentioned that we were probably going to touch on, Tom, was the 5 Nations.
Yeah.
I don't think it's happening this year. I know like the FIPS World and Europeans, isn't. Haven't seen anything about it, but when you did it, Tom, where was it? Just refresh.
It was at Stocks.
Oh, so it was in England.
Yeah, so it was in England. Yeah, so it's Stocks and the Ribble, I think it was.
Yeah.
To be fair, you performed better than anybody expected, but I think that was down to the guy that managed you.
Yeah, Paul was the manager then.
Oh, shit, yeah, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, Paul was the manager. Took some lovely headshots.
Yeah. While he was giving the head.
Actually, you just reminded me something. The first time I met you, Tom, was when you were working at the lodge at Stocks.
Yeah.
We were there for I think it was an Anglian Water or Lexus qualifier.
Yeah.
And I remember coming into the lodge, and we were all sat around the table having a breakfast. And we were talking about the night before when you were tying cat boobies in the pub.
Yeah, Paul was burning them. What gets me about that story was I did it about 3 times. Wasn't just like he was like, yes, you've not done it like the first time when it went up in flames. You'd have thought that.
Hang on. Oh, for the benefit of everyone who wasn't sat around this table that are listening right now, I want Paul to tell the story. Then you can put your 5 pages in.
Well, Tom at that age was very vulnerable.
This is going way off piece,
so he was tying these flies, and if I remember rightly, it was a cat booby, wasn't it?
Cat, yeah.
I still don't know what quite possessed me to get my fly tying device out in the middle of a pub in front of all you lot. But anyway.
So he tied it, and then I watched him with the tail, and I says, Tom, that's not how to do it. You know, we nip the tail off. I says, I'll show you a trick. I says, nip it. I says, and you can actually do it. If you nip it, and then the little fibers that are sticking through to make them even, just go like that and just go like that. And it just, they're gone. Tom done it too slow, and he went.
No, you were in control of the lighter.
And when he lifted his fingers off, there was a hook left. And then a couple of minutes later, he starts tying another one, and he gets the same place. And I went, try it again, but do it faster. And he'd done it faster, and it still burned everything off. So, yeah, that was Tom's sort of introduction to my sense of humour.
Yeah.
So, back to 5 Nations. What year was it, guys? How long ago was it?
3 years ago, wasn't it?
Is it 2007? Yeah, 2017 it was.
Yeah,
because I had Home Nations as well the same year.
Yeah.
How do you get on?
So 5 Nations. Yeah, 5 Nations with silver.
Silver.
Silver. But we had 2 teams in it, and to be fair, the atmosphere was brilliant, wasn't it, Tom?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was good. I mean, but you wouldn't have known. There was 2 teams. We were all sharing information, flies. You know, tie-in at night together. We're all in the same meetings, and you know, I was obviously because there was 2 teams. We would be sharing. Well, I think on one of the things, I got Drew in the boat with the other team, England member. You know, and it wasn't like fishing against him. We were sharing exactly what we were doing. You know, passing the flies around. So it was great.
Yeah,
I think in them situations, Scott, that was the perfect time, I think, to show what it should have been like. And to be fair, there was a lot of things that were done, and I thought, go on, I'll give you your head and let you do it. But what we got was, we got them all singing off the same hymn sheet. And me and you seen the other side of it, world and Europeans, where damn well if people don't tell you everything. And I never ever got that feeling in the Five Nations that nobody was keeping anything back. And it was a lovely atmosphere to have. And if we could get that going in every competition with England, it would make a massive difference to results.
Yeah, it's probably an underestimated team in regards to development.
Talking a lot about the Phipps Mooship thing. I mean, it's completely different mindset, obviously, to a home international. Literally, you are fishing for you're fishing for one fish, because it makes an absolutely massive difference to the team result. That one fish, however many points it is, you suddenly go from, if 5 people blank, you suddenly go from, if there's 50 people getting 50 points, just jumping up to, if it's our day, you might suddenly be on 30 points. It makes a massive difference.
Yeah. How do you...
What people don't realise, and this is why on that occasion I got them working so well together. I'm not saying Howard, but you only become world champion because you're in a team. Now, this is my honest opinion, give or take a couple of percent. 40% of becoming world champion is down to your knowledge. Then you have 20% luck. 60% knowledge. Then you have 20% luck. And the other 20% that you need to become world champion is fed in from the rest of the team. And that's how I honestly believe you will get a world champion. But what you get, if you're working all together properly, within time, individual world champions should become a byproduct of the team winning goal.
Yeah.
And I just think it's there's a lot more mentally should go into the team.
A lot more what, sorry?
A lot more mental thought.
Yeah, it's kind of how I talk about like Premier League football. There's still a lot of people at work, and the Premier League players, a lot of them are a very similar level, like an amazing fitness, touch. They can think about the game better than anybody else, but the difference between a lot of them is the mental side.
Yeah.
You look at the best players like Ronaldo and Messi and stuff like that, their mental strength on the pitch is better. They keep going till the 94th minute or 95th minute. How many times have you seen, you talk about Fergie time in football. Fergie time wasn't something the ref added on. Fergie time was him as a manager coaching his players to play until the 94th minute.
Until the whistle goes.
Until the whistle goes.
Yeah.
And that's the same in England, especially if you've got a reduced hours competition like the Phipps Moosh. And my next question, Tom, was how did you find the difference on your approach, especially on a boat session, fishing the 3-hour session, Phipps Moosh and the Five Nations, to what you would do in an 8-hour match?
I think you've just got to be. I mean, one thing you said, fishing matches. I remember I was out with Mark Harrison in the boat session at Stocks, the first one. And in the morning, I had quite hard. My first session was on the bank. It'd been really hard. It was blowing. I think it was actually, in terms of it, points and fish caught, it was the worst session to fish it because of the conditions.
Yeah.
And I'd lost a brownie that took right close to the boat, and I was really a bit down. And I went out and I was fishing with Mark, and we'd sort of found out they like pink zonkers, and it was pulling and roly-polying. And Mark had sort of had, I think he'd had 2 fish, and I had not had any, and I'd not got much interest, and my head was starting to go a bit, and we got about 15 minutes left, and conditions changed a bit, and I changed to a washing line, and I managed to get one, and but as I got it in, I think I had 2 more casts, and we'd got to go. So I'd fished right to the end, and it was that like gave me a lot of confidence. You know, it will happen. Keep going.
Yeah.
But you've got to be. I think in a 3-hour session, your decision making's got to be a lot better. You know, you can't waste time thinking, oh, I'm going to change to this, and then do it and it not work. If you're thinking of changing, just change. You know, don't spend 15-20 minutes thinking, should I do this? Just give it a go. Or if on my last session in the boat, it was pretty good conditions for dries, and I thought, we've only got 3 hours. We need a few fish. I'm not going to bother changing, to be honest. I'm just going to stick to the dries and see if we can winkle a couple out. Because there's not the time to spend chopping and changing, and that's where the practice comes in. Practice is, you've got to make sure you get a good practice and get, like we had, match boxes which were all set out the same and didn't go out of them. And it's not that other flies wouldn't have worked. It's just speed. You got to get.
That was one of the things it happened where I wasn't very happy about. I'd give you your heads, and it worked. And what they were doing, Scott, instead of all having the same fly box, we had a box for the river, we had a box for the bank, we had 2 boxes for the board. And when they were finishing sessions, they were exchanging boxes. So it meant there was less fly tying to be done, and it was easier for them to quickly open and say, right, that's the one there.
Yeah.
What?
I'll take your hat off. I didn't think it would work, but it did, and it worked well.
Yeah, and then at night, all you did was get the boxes in. Right, what we're missing out of this box?
Yeah.
Just fill the gaps.
Yeah, yeah. What is the 7 Ps or 8 Ps? Piss poor planning prevents piss poor performance.
Maybe it's in your case.
Well, that's just the motto you work to, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all about, you just got to make sure we had quite a good practice. Yeah. So we knew what.
I don't think anybody held anything back, but I think that was more down to they knew what I would do.
Is that why you only did it 1 year?
I've got no fear. If I caught somebody doing that, I'd send them straight home.
No, it was a good experience. I enjoyed it. It was good. Fishing was good.
The thing that annoys me about you, Tom, you've got your lock style cap, and I know you're decent on a river. And I just wish you would go for that river cap, because I don't think you would be detrimental to any team.
Yeah, it's time as well. Time. I don't know. I've not fished the lock styles for a couple of years, and I am enjoying. I mean, I enjoy the competitions, but I'm enjoying just not being in the matches as well.
Yeah.
I don't. There was never pressure, but you'd always put a bit of pressure on yourself because you want to do well. You don't want to, enter a comp and do rubbish. You always put that bit of added pressure. Whereas, especially like the rivers for me, because I've never, other than the 5 Nations, I've never competed in the rivers. So for me, it's a bit of it's. While obviously when I go to the river, I always want to try and maximise how many I can catch, so I can, I'm always trying different things. I'm not necessarily. There's not that pressure, whereas there was when I was doing the matches in the boat. So it's a little bit different. It's a bit away from that. But I would like to do the get a rivers cap.
Well, put it this way: I've seen a lot of people worse than you with a river cap. I'm not Scott.
Probably, yeah. You don't fish where you get it. I mean, Paul's got one, for Christ's sake. So
1.
I don't know how many you got.
I think I've got 3.
Right.
If you work it on the old system, I've probably got about 5 or 6.
Cool. Let's leave that there because time's getting on and I'm going fishing tonight, so I don't want to waffle. We'll finish off with the guest Q&A.
Can I ask some questions this time? Because you always ask.
Let me do this and then we can do your questions, because your questions will take so long. So here we go, Tom.
Yeah,
it's supposed to last 60 seconds, but that's only if Paul doesn't put his 2 pits in, right? First time we've done this with Simon Kidd, it lasted 45 minutes. So favourite venue?
Draycote.
Favourite line?
Floater or midge tip. Don't know. That's saying.
Cripple midge or ginger Midas?
Cripple midge.
That wasn't actually one of the questions, but I just put it in my head, so I thought I've got to ask it. The place you would most like to fish that you've not done so already?
Draycote.
I always fish that. I don't know. I'd like to travel a little bit more and fish it'd probably be rivers. Probably travel a bit more and fish. I'd like to fish like France and Spain and Italy, some of those really clear rivers, just to give it a go and see what it's like.
One of the
how hard it'd be.
Slovenia's the place, mate.
Yeah, there's loads of fish in there. But if you want to go somewhere and catch loads of fish, really underrated places are like Sweden, Norway, and Finland.
Yeah, I saw. Who was it? It was Tom Hunt, and people went on They did an article for Andy Taylor's magazine about going to Bavaria, and it just looked good. I like the whole idea of going on a bit of a road trip, so not just fishing, going and seeing somewhere. It's like when I went to Slovenia, I really enjoyed just being there. Yeah. I was there on a conference, so I really enjoyed the whole being there, seeing the culture,
Beautiful country, isn't it?
Yeah, the beer, the food, and at that time, it wasn't really a massive fishing, it was, but it's not like it is now. Now it's like a destination holiday place. Then it was still a little bit sort of off the radar, so it wasn't as popular. So I like that idea, a bit underrated, sort of, like you said.
Yeah. So next one is your proudest moment in fly fishing.
Beat me in the heated.
That was quite good. I have to say that was quite.
Yeah, you
quite,
that. You only done that because you dropped a bloody pot of stockies.
Yeah, all right. Moment. Do you know? I think it was. I think it was probably that feeling when I stood up. I think I was just 18 or not, just 19 when I got my first England cap, and they called my name in seventh place at Buell, and they said, one of the youngest competitors here, and I stood up in front of 100 people at Buell and walked up and got my England cap. Walked up and got my national medal for getting in the first England team. That was probably my proudest. But that was good. But I got the same sort of feeling when I bagged up to get my second England cap on Chew, because no one else had done it for the entire weekend, and it'd been really hard. And I got the same feeling then doing that. So, but probably
you were drifting in front of me as well.
Yeah, it was probably my first England cap when I still remember the feeling, the smile, and the sort of getting it. It was just really, it was good. Probably that.
So on the opposite foot, worst moment in fly fishing.
Worst moment.
Stops tying boobies.
Yeah, that wasn't great. Worst moment. I mean, I've had some real bad competition days where I've not had a pull or a thingy that they take some sort of hard. One of the worst I'll tell you what, actually, one of the worst ones was, and this is going to sound one of the worst ones, and this is, I probably not really spoke about this, was on my last England cap when we won gold at Menteith. I had a shocker of a day. I couldn't get my head in the right place. I don't know what it was. I wasn't there for it. Just my mind wasn't on it. And I missed 6, 7, 8 fish on dries through not paying attention, looking the other way, thinking about changing flies, thinking about going around on the drift. And I lost loads of fish in Gateside, and I lost fish elsewhere. And I think I landed 3 fish. Ian Barr had a really good performance, had 27, and it was fantastic to win the gold. But I remember feeling after the international that disappointment of only having 3. And I actually came last out of everyone in the entire.
You win gold, and you still feel as though you've let people down.
Yeah, because I don't felt like I contributed at all. I mean, we could have won gold without Ian Barr and without the next man. We would have that much lead, but I just didn't feel I contributed. And it didn't help that when at the international dinner, I felt a bit down, and someone in the team turned to me and said, "Oh yeah, I came into that bay after you'd been in it for 3 hours and you'd caught nothing, and I came in there and had 10. What were you playing at?" And I was like, that whole thing was not good for me.
No. See, situations like that, I don't give a shit how good you are. We all have shitters.
Mm.
But when it happens, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, when Scott says, your worst moment in fly fishing, it's probably, well, it is literally my life. It's my work. It's what I do. My days off. There isn't many. Even on a bad day's comp fishing that week, while it was that, I felt a bit disappointed. I still really enjoyed the week, and we still had a really great crack, and we got the gold, which is obviously the goal at the end of the day. It's a team sport. But I just do remember that feeling of, like Paul says, I could have fished better and contributed to the performance. But like I say, it didn't matter because we were that far ahead of all the other teams. It didn't make a difference anyway.
Sometimes you contribute before the match with what you find out on.
No, I did. I mean, we had really good practice days. Black Midas with red legs.
Also,
yeah, that was. I found that took not some getting over, but it played on my mind for quite a while. About I was technically last in the international.
Yeah. What, last out of all 4 teams?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is a shitter.
That is a shitter. You're right.
Fucking hell. One more question, Tom, and then Paul can have his thing.
You've got to experience shit to appreciate good.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah, exactly. So, last question, Tom. You're stuck on a desert island. You can take one person and one thing with you. Who do you take and what do you take?
I know what is going to come up.
Taking Sarah? Yeah, I'm going to say I'm going to take Sarah because she might watch this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say I'm going to take Sarah, but I probably would take a fly rod and some saltwater flies. Depends where I am, depends what you're doing, but I'd probably take Sarah to play safe.
See, I would have said I'll take Sarah and a pot of champagne. Not you.
No, I'll take fly rod as well. She likes fly fishing. And obviously, to be diplomatic, if it's a really good saltwater destination venue, and this is like a holiday I'm stuck on, obviously I'd take Ivor, my boss, because if their situation ever arises, needs to take me on a holiday.
All right, go on, Paul. Over to you.
I've got no ask.
Oh, that's great.
Do you miss how are you enjoying being down there now? Because obviously you're from up north.
No, it's good. Yeah, I enjoy it. Obviously, there's that old adage: if you get a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I can pretty honestly say I've never woken up once and thought I don't want to go in today.
Yeah, good for you. I always said that's when you've got life cracked. When you go into work, you earn a living, but you love it.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's days where it's, when I was the boatman, it was blowing a gale, it was horrible, it was windy, and it gets pretty, Draycote's very busy, and it can get pretty stressful in the lodge. But when it clears, it's great.
When you close down, Tom, just one question popped in my head, sorry. When you close down, like in the winter, what are you guys? You just doing maintenance around the...
Yeah, so I'm employed all the way through the year, so I'm full time. So I do I sort of set up all the courses for the next year, the tuition days, set the dates, do some stuff on the online shop, get the new stock on there, and then do the boat maintenance and whatever needs doing. So when they come off, they go down the yard, engines go away to be serviced, back to 80, turn the boats over, pressure wash them all off, and then fill in any repair work that needs doing. Try and avoid doing the wood surround work and the seats and stuff until it gets a bit warmer, because it's not the conditions in the winter to do them. But fiberglass work if we can on the warm days.
Nice. Right, guys, we're just going up to an hour, so I think that's probably a good time to call it quits. So thanks, Tom, for joining us. Thanks for your time. It's been great to chat to you.
Good to see you, Matt.
Enjoyed it.
I hope everyone's enjoyed listening. That's some really good information there about Draycote, about how these guys fish the dries. They're both well known for it now. obviously,
Are you on Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yeah.
Good lad.
obviously, we're going to have a chat now about which is actually the best fly, the crippled midge or the Midas. So
I'll cripple you.
They're both as good as each other. It's just different
It's
No,
times.
no.
it's a way you fish it. The amount of people. Have you heard what the new name is for the Midas?
Yes. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and it's been given that name by people who can't fish dries, and it's called the roundabout because according to them, all it does is swim round it. What a load of shit!
right, okay.
Come get a lesson off me, or Tom.
There you are. There's an invite for everyone out there. So, thanks again, guys. Have a good weekend. Enjoy next week when you're down there, Paul. We'll speak to you when you get back, I'm sure.
Stocks Monday, Draycote Tuesday, Wednesday.
If you can get a boat.
No, I've got one.
He's got one.
That was your chance there, Tom. That was your chance to really. I was going to just about press stop recording. Now all I wanted you to say, well, we'll see what we can do, and then that would have been a nice.
Doesn't get his mud, does he?
Don't get my mud.
It's all about the mud. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheers.
Catch you later.